I have something to say to one of my viewers. We may not like Pookie's behavior, but we understand that Pookie has rights too. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, 1987. Learn lessons about life and teenage love in the 1980s with this coming-of-age John Haynes story. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, 1987 at online booksellers everywhere. I got a comment from a viewer that looked to minimize the death of Jordan Neely. And this individual wanted to go out here and say Jordan Neely, like George Floyd, was just another Pookie, and they wanted to pose the question, how is crying for Pookies lead to black empowerment? And they wanted to say that the black community seems to be misled by snake oil salesmen, but there is no snake oil in the case of either George Floyd or Jordan Neely, because if people can go out here and take away the rights of an individual like a George Floyd or a mentally ill black person like a Jordan Neely, they will go out here and then look to take away the rights of other black Americans and Americans overall. Because even though Jordan Neely did have mental health problems and came through hard times, Jordan Neely was born a United States citizen, and according to the United States Constitution, he has rights of a U.S. citizen, and those rights are guaranteed to him by the U.S. Constitution. And how does that relate to black empowerment? Well, if this black person does not have rights like any other U.S. citizen, then what happens when we minimize the rights of someone like Jordan Neely is we allow white supremacists and their bootlicks to go out here and take away power from black people. That is how it relates to black empowerment, because if you have people looking to take away the basic rights of a black citizen, what you are doing is minimizing their ability to have their freedom and liberty. And this is the point that flies over the head of this viewer. This viewer wants to try to say that Jordan Neely was a Pookie. No, Jordan Neely was not a Pookie. No, Jordan Neely was born into a situation where I say he was a man who was on the road to becoming a man in crisis. And that crisis started when he saw the horrific death of his mother right in front of his eyes, when his stepfather murdered her. And this stepfather just did his mother dirty by putting her corpse in a suitcase and leaving it on the street. That type of trauma right there can just destroy a child, because this happened when Jordan Neely was just 13 years old, and on seeing that type of horror being presented in front of you, watching your own mother lose her life and then having her body just desecrated by a man who said that he loved her, this again is a trauma that will stay with a boy, and this is the kind of trauma that stays with boys and leads to them having mental health issues, and those mental health issues were further compounded because he had no support and he was in and out of the foster system. And as he was in and out of the foster system, he was dealing with environments where he was not really loved or cared for, and he didn't even get any possible sort of counseling as related to seeing the horrific and traumatic death of his mother. So this young boy basically was dealing with a lot of trauma early on in his life, and he was suffering, and he tried to escape by music, and he tried to, I believe, escape through Michael Jackson's music. And as he escaped through Michael Jackson's music, he then, as he was aged out of the foster care system, possibly thought, oh, I'll be able to try to make a living on this by dancing in the subway. And he was possibly trying to do this for a while. Unfortunately, all of the traumas as related to his past made his mental health situation deteriorate. And those traumas, again, these were things that were not dealt with in counseling. And since they were not dealt with in counseling, this boy grew up to become a man in crisis. And this man in crisis basically dealt with a world that was not looking to support him, nor did he have the life skills or the ability to process as related to surviving in that world. And that's what we saw happen on that train. Tragically, we saw a young boy growing up to become a man who didn't have the life skills or survival skills, and his mental health had deteriorated. And as his mental health deteriorated, he was just struggling to try to find a way in life, and he was just at his wits' end. And you just have to be there to understand what that is. And I have been there in my life. I mean, I've been there 2 times. I remember losing my job at AmeriCorps and just the whole thing falling apart there when vice president of the company told me there was no place for me in their organization after doing good work for them. And you're trying to get stuff together, then you finally get another job, and it only lasts 2 weeks because you and the boss, he can't get along because he's a racist, and things just fall apart. And then you're trying to get yourself together, and then just as you're getting yourself together, you run into another racist employer and black bootlicks, and your whole life you're just trying to pull it together, but then you get no support. And when you're trying to get work out here, you're running into resistance, like this HR brick wall that's erected by women and designed to keep black men out of a job. Again, these are the things that men like myself and Jordan Neely had to deal with. And because Jordan Neely was dealing with mental health issues and had no real coping mechanisms and never learned how to cope, what happened was you saw a man at his wits' end, and he basically just lost it. He possibly had a run-in with somebody on the street, topside, before he got on the subway, and he just went into this just frustration as related to everything. And as he went into this frustration as related to everything, this white guy decides, oh, I'm gonna play hero, and he's gonna go out here and attack this man who basically is having a mental health episode. And he's having that mental health episode because he feels powerless about his life situation. He feels like he cannot make any sort of changes because there's nowhere for him to go. He can't go out here and get a job because of the women erecting the HR brick wall with the support of white males and bootlicks. And he cannot go out here and sign up for programs like welfare or SSI because these programs are made for women only. And this young man basically had no support. And again, when a man has no support, he feels like he has nothing to lose, and he feels like he has nothing to lose because there's nobody looking to make any sort of investment in him. And again, this relates to black empowerment because this man lost what little power that he had as a citizen. This white person looked to take away his right to express himself. Yes, he was frustrated and angry, and he had a right to express that frustration. If he was not putting hands on anyone, he could go out here and rant and rave on that train. That is his constitutional right as a U.S. citizen under our Constitution, and these are basic rights. And when this individual decided to put hands on Jordan Neely, what they were looking to do was take away his life liberty and his pursuit of his life. These are the things he took away from him, and as he put him in that chokehold, he basically made it where this black man lost his power and his right to freedom, all because this individual wanted to play a hero. That is what it relates to black empowerment, because if somebody can take away the power of Jordan Neely and get a not guilty verdict like the ones that George Zimmerman receives. What that does is it creates a legal precedent very similar to the ones we got in Jim Crow America. And those legal precedents are dangerous because they take away the rights that black men and black women have. And what it does is it sets up a legal precedent that tells us that if a black person acts emotional or very erratic, a white person has the justification to go out here and take their life. That is the legal precedent that black people are looking to fight about, because this is about taking away our power and using the courts and the legal system to take away our power and give a white person or a non-black person the agency to believe that if they perceive a black person to be a threat, they have the justification to go out here and take their lives, all because they feel, quote unquote, unsafe. This is the legal precedent that was started to be established when George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin, and this case could further reinforce that point, because what happened with the case of George Zimmerman is George Zimmerman, who was racially profiling Trayvon Martin, decided he was going to follow him, and he said he was going to follow him, but then when he was confronted by Trayvon Martin, he said he was in fear for his life. And again, this is a contradiction here, because you have George Zimmerman, who was carrying a gun, trying to play the hero, saying that he saw Trayvon Martin as a threat and was calling 911 as related to that threat. However, he decided to follow Trayvon Martin. Again, contradictions, because you're saying this boy is a threat, but you're following him. And if he's such a threat, then you would disengage and let law enforcement handle it. But these individuals, what they want to do is go out here and participate in their anti-black racism. And as they participate in their anti-black racism, what they want to do is find an excuse to justify their anti-black racism. And this is what racists would do with a case like Jordan Neely. They will use it to say, oh, this white guy is in fear for his life, so he has the justification to take the life of a black person who did not physically engage him, did not escalate the situation, the same way that George Zimmerman, he went out here and escalated things. These whites and non-blacks will escalate a situation so that they believe they can have the justification to use force. And again, you'll have people saying, oh, this seems like we're being misled by snake oil salesmen. No, this isn't about these bootlicks like Al Sharpton or any of these other so-called activists. These are black people from the grassroots talking about how we have a problem here, because what these people want to do is take away our power. And again, they want to take away our power and take us back to the days of the Jim Crow South, where a black person had no rights anybody needed to regard. That's what the whole Jordan Neely case is all about. And what's really disturbing is, like the case of George Floyd, this case is taking place in a so-called blue leftist state where black people are supposed to have it so-called better. But we see that the blue party has not really changed much since the days of Jim Crow, when they created the policies of Jim Crow and separate and unequal. And what's really scary this time is that instead of white faces going out here and enforcing those policies like they did in the Jim Crow South, they have gotten black bootlicks to become their puppets, like Eric Adams and Alvin Bragg. And here in New York, a blue state, they are out here looking to make excuses. You have Eric Adams talking about wait and see. And I have to wonder with Eric Adams, do you want to wait and see if a white person does this to you? Because if this precedent is allowed to pass, that same precedent that's used on Jordan Neely will be used on any black person, including many of these celebrities and other prominent blacks. And they don't understand that when you create these interpretations of the law, they become the law of the land. And again, many of these black bootlicks believe this can't happen to them. And again, this is why people have to stand up for Jordan Neely, because Jordan Neely could be any of us, and Jordan Neely could be any of us. And again, this is something that is why black people have to come out, because what happened to Jordan Neely, if this becomes the law of the land, this enables vigilantes like George Zimmerman in Florida. It emboldens vigilantes like George Zimmerman and enables them to go out here and believe they have a right to put hands on just about anyone. And that's a very dangerous precedent, because the only reason for somebody to engage somebody is if somebody's life is in jeopardy. And in the case of Jordan Neely, yes, he was being emotional and erratic, and he was out of control, but he was not participating in any sort of criminal action outside of maybe some misdemeanor. And again, that's not a reason to use force. No, that in these cases, and I've lived in New York City and I've been riding the train for about 35 years, been riding them since I was about maybe a little boy. And in every case, I have seen episodes like this. People either they got off the train either by the side doors at the end of each car, or what they did was they just waited for the train to get to the next stop, and they got off the car. And as that person was having their episode, what they would do is leave and then let the police handle that situation. That is what people do. And again, this is what this individual, he wants to try to minimize and say, oh, George, he's like George Floyd. No, George Floyd, that was a murder, plain and simple. That was a call over a counterfeit $20 bill. And again, if that store owner had not accepted that bill, they didn't need to call 911. All they needed to do was say, look, I'm not taking this money, and leave it at that. And that whole situation again escalated into a situation where somebody thought, oh, this black man is a threat, and they called the police on him to kill him. And then the police thought, oh, this black person's life doesn't matter. And you have other people out here, they want to minimize George Floyd, saying, oh, people wanted to get out. No, this was about a black person having their rights violated, and the same thing happened here as related to Jordan Neely. His civil rights were violated. His civil rights were basically violated because this individual thought that they were above the law, thought that they were above the Constitution, and they thought they were going to volunteer to be this person who was going to take out the threat of this crazy homeless person. Again, these are the types of thinking of individuals who are dysfunctional. And what's troubling here is that this individual is a U.S. Marine. You would think a U.S. Marine would understand our Constitution and what it means. And also, this guy, I've heard, his father was a police officer and a big brass officer. Again, you would think he would know policy, and you would think he would know policy to know better than to engage. But sadly, it doesn't seem like he didn't want to decide to think about any of those things. And again, this individual who made this comment, they want to talk about what does this mean to black empowerment. Well, you can't have black empowerment without a foundation of the Constitution, because the Constitution is the basic rights that every foundational black American has. And if we don't have our rights under the Constitution, then we can't go out here and take power. And again, taking power, you need to have ability to have something that you can have as a base for your power. And again, your power and your rights and your liberty, these are things that you have to stand for. You have to stand for your rights and your liberty, because if you don't have basic human rights, what will happen is people will look to take your rights. And that's what happened during the days of Jim Crow, before the murder of Emmett Till. Before the murder of Emmett Till, what happened was white racists and non-black racists thought they had a right to go out here and see a black person as less than, and they believed that they had a right to destroy a black person's life. They believed they were justified in taking a black person's life, and a black person's life had no real value. The black person had rights that nobody needed to regard. That's what these individuals in white supremacy and that blue party in the past believed. They believed we have a right to destroy a black person, and that person's life is at our tender mercies. They believe, oh, it's our right to take that person's life, because if they go out here and violate our unwritten social rules, we have a right to go out here and do with them as ever they please. And that's why some are calling what happened on that train in that blue state that is so-called tolerant a lynching, because this was a white person acting on their own, and as they act on their own, what they look to do is take away our rights the way the Klan used to do. And what's troubling is that this is the second state or the third state which is supposedly blue, and the people who are blue are in these blue states are acting anti-black, like Kathy Hochul and many others. They're acting just as racist as those that they claim to be in the red states. And this individual, they're looking to minimize the death of Jordan Neely the same way other white supremacists do. And again, Jordan Neely's death is important because Jordan Neely, he may have had a hard life, but he had rights like every other American in this country, and he had constitutional rights that were violated, sadly, by a member of the former Marines. And again, that's really shows how dysfunctional this country is, because we have a soldier not understanding what he's fighting for, not understanding what he is doing as related to our Constitution, because his actions are a complete betrayal of everything that was written in that Constitution, and everything that the way he acted was just like something out of the dark days of Jim Crow. And again, really troubling, because all of this is happening in a so-called tolerant blue state that is a so-called sanctuary city for immigrants. But even in a city that's a sanctuary city for immigrants, they all are out here pushing and supporting anti-black racism. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available for the first time in paperback, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single. Learn all the reasons why so many black women can't find a husband and why 70% of black women are single. Get your copy of Why 70% of Black Women Are Single on Amazon.com today.